Luke, chapter 4, Synagogue Blindness, Silent Years. The classroom smelled faintly of commercial carpet cleaner and dry erase markers, as the afternoon sun cut through the horizontal blinds, painting sharp slats of amber across the large oak table. Spread out between the 6 members of the advanced text group were parallel Greek codices, structural worksheets, and heavily annotated printouts of Luke chapter 4. They had spent the previous hour tracing the text line by line, but the air in the room had shifted into a tense, quiet vibration the moment they drifted past the standard sermon outlines to look at the massive cosmic anomalies hiding just beneath Luke's polished prose. Lucas tapped his pen against his notebook, his legalistic background instantly keying into the wilderness dialogue. "Look at the legal mechanics in verse 6, he said, leaning over his interlinear text. "When the devil presents all the kingdoms of the world and says, 'This has been delivered to me, and I give it to whomever I wish,' we have to stop treating that like a standard cartoon lie. If it's a total fabrication, Jesus' response is bizarre. He doesn't contest the legal title or call him a fraud. He leaves the lease agreement completely alone and attacks the posture of worship instead. It's a tactical acknowledgement that a cosmic forfeiture event actually took place in our history. The adversary claims legal custody of the world's systems, which frames this entire gospel not as a simple moral cleanup, but as a hostile strategic repossession of stolen property." Ethan nodded, his technical mindset tracking the bizarre physical layout of that exact same moment. "And the text explicitly signals that the physics of that encounter are completely decoupled from linear time," he added, pulling up a lexicon sheet. Luke uses the phrase in stigmē chronou, literally in a microscopic dot of time. It's a spatial temporal compression engine. He didn't take Jesus up a high hill for a scenic panoramic view. The text is screaming that the adversary has the capability to step outside of standard chronos to display the full mass of global systemic glory in a single, timeless flash. But look at how the enemy weaponizes that data. He literally quotes Psalm chapter 91 back to Jesus at the pinnacle of the temple. The untold story here is that the counterforces possess a hyper-advanced, weaponized literacy. The devil knows the exact wording of the text, but he applies it with fraudulent structural intent, trying to bait Jesus into testing the Father's operational boundaries. But the narrative compression Luke uses to bridge the gap after the wilderness is just as staggering, Grace said, her voice softening as she looked at the human element of the timeline. In verse 16, Luke drops a single phrase, "as his custom was." That one little Greek word, iothos, is a massive silent engine that quietly swallows the missing 18 years between the 12-year-old boy in the temple and the 30-year-old man at the Jordan. Think about the relational realism of that. Jesus didn't just explode onto the scene out of nowhere. He spent nearly 2 decades participating in an unrecorded, completely mundane weekly liturgical rhythm in a tiny village. The neighbors witnessed his quiet, routine conformity for years, without ever perceiving the explosive, reality-altering identity sitting right next to them on the synagogue benches. Hannah leaned forward, her fingers tracing the Old Testament cross-references, where the narrative tension finally erupted. And when that quiet conformity ends in the Nazareth synagogue, Jesus executes the most calculated text interruption in ancient history, she murmured, scanning the lines of the scroll. He unrolls the prophet Isaiah, reads from chapter 61, and then rolls the scroll back up and sits down right in the middle of a sentence. He reads up to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor and stops dead. The very next phrase in the physical Hebrew manuscript is, "and the day of vengeance of our God." By deliberately cutting the text there, Jesus mathematically charts the timeline of his entire mission. He isolates the first advent as an exclusive window of restorative amnesty and jubilee liberation, intentionally deferring the day of cosmic vengeance to a completely separate eschatological horizon, which makes the sudden shift in the Capernaum synagogue even more chilling, Chloe observed, shifting the focus to the behavioral patterns of the region. In verse 33, Luke notes a man in the synagogue who has the spirit of an unclean demon. It's almost written like a throwaway comment, but it's a massive diagnostic tell. That demonic entity was sitting perfectly comfortable, completely camouflaged inside the clean, dry parameters of a traditional religious establishment. Low-level systemic anomalies can coexist with dry religion for years without causing a single ripple, but the absolute second exousia, sovereign spoken authority, steps into the room, the equilibrium breaks. The demon doesn't manifest because it wants to. It screams because the active holiness of Jesus physically forces it into the light. Samuel sat back in his heavy chair at the end of the table, his seasoned, practical perspective anchoring the high-level analysis. "That's the core of the whole chapter, team," he said, looking around the small circle of students. "From the wilderness to the synagogue, this isn't just a collection of nice stories or theological equations. It's a warning against our own speculative human hubris. Luke is showing us that our visible world operates right on top of a massive, structural cosmic reality. Jesus didn't come to fit into our religious formulas or clear up a few bad habits. He came with absolute, sovereign authority to perform a deep, legal, and physical reconstruction on a broken creation.